On a cold October night, the sky blood red as the full moon rose, casting a haunting glow across the small town of Ravenswood. The locals had always whispered about the blood moon, warning each other to stay inside, to lock their doors, and never to look up. They called it the night of the blood moon, a night when the dead would walk, when spirits would scream, and when the thin veil between the living and the damned would finally tear open. Maya, a young college student visiting her grandmother's old house at the edge of the woods, had heard the stories but never believed them. To her, the blood moon was just a natural phenomenon, something beautiful to photograph, nothing more. But as the crimson light crept through the windows and painted the walls in shades of blood, she felt a chill that made her bones ache. Her grandmother's house always felt strange, filled with old portraits and creaking floorboards. But that night it seemed alive, breathing with her, watching her every move. Outside, the silence was heavy. No crickets sang, no owls hooted. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Maya lit a candle when the power suddenly flickered and died, plunging the house into shadows. The wax flame danced nervously, throwing distorted shapes against the walls, and she thought she saw movement where there was none. She told herself it was nerves, nothing more, but when the front gate slammed open without a sound, she knew something was wrong. She peered out through the cracked curtains. The street was empty, bathed in the red glow of the moon, but shadows moved between the trees, darting quickly, unnaturally. At first, she thought it was animals, but the shadows stood tall. Too tall, their limbs stretched in jagged angles. She gasped softly, backing away from the window, and that was when she heard it, faint whispers rising from the floorboards. She held her breath, crouching down, pressing her ear to the wood. The whispers grew louder, forming words she couldn't understand, a language that clawed at her brain. Then the voices screamed all at once, so violently that the candle blew out, plunging her into complete darkness. In the pitch black, she felt something brush past her shoulder, cold and heavy, as though unseen hands were circling her. Panicked, she grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, and in that instant, she saw them. Faces, dozens of them, pressed against the window glass from outside. Their eyes were hollow pits, their mouths gaping open in silent screams. She stumbled backward, the phone slipping from her hand, the light spinning across the room. When she picked it up again, the faces were gone. The front door creaked open slowly, though she hadn't touched it. The night air poured in, icy and metallic, carrying the smell of iron and rot. Maya wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy, locked in place by fear. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall and skeletal, its face hidden beneath a hood. It pointed at her with a bony finger, and behind it, more figures emerged, their forms shifting like shadows, all drawn toward the blood moon's glow. Her grandmother's voice suddenly echoed in her mind, a memory of an old warning she used to dismiss. On the blood moon night, the dead will return for what was taken. Do not answer when they call. Do not open the door, and above all, do not follow the voices. Maya felt her throat tighten. She hadn't answered. She hadn't spoken, but the door had still opened. The hooded figure stepped inside, dragging something across the floor. The sound of metal scraping filled the room. Maya shined her flashlight, and her stomach dropped. It was a coffin, old and cracked, dragged by chains that clinked against the wooden boards. The figure lifted the lid, and inside lay a body, pale and fragile, with hair just like hers. Its eyes snapped, opened suddenly, black and endless, and it screamed silently at her. Maya's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She bolted up the stairs, slamming doors behind her, but the figures didn't walk. They glided, moving through walls as if they were smoke. She ran into her grandmother's old bedroom, locking the door and pressing her weight against it, though she knew it wouldn't hold. On the dresser sat an old leather book, worn and cracked, with strange markings etched on its cover. She opened it desperately, pages filled with the same symbols she had heard whispered from the floorboards. The language of the dead. Her hands trembled as she flipped through. One passage was circled in red ink. It read, "Two survived the blood moon night. One must silence the dead with fire, or join them forever in silence." Her eyes darted to the candle she had left downstairs, still faintly glowing. If she could light it and hold it, maybe it would keep them away. But when she turned toward the door, she saw the figures seeping through, their hollow faces stretching, their hands reaching for her. She smashed the window with the lamp, shards flying, and climbed onto the roof. The red moon glared down at her like an open wound, bathing the entire world in its cursed glow. The town below was no longer quiet. Now it screamed. She saw neighbors stumbling out of houses, chased by shadows, their screams swallowed by the night. Ravens flew in swarms across the sky, their wings beating like war drums. The blood moon pulsed as though alive, a heartbeat in the heavens, and she realized it was feeding. Feeding on fear. Feeding on screams. Maya slid down the roof, landing hard on the ground, and sprinted into the woods. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their branches clawing at her clothes, but she kept running, clutching her phone as her only light. Behind her, the whispers followed, chanting her name now, pulling at her mind. She stumbled into a clearing, and at its center stood a stone altar blackened with ash. Bones were piled around it, offerings from generations before. She realized this was where it began, the place her ancestors had once tried to contain the curse. The shadows closed in, circling her. She spotted a rusted lantern half, buried in the dirt, with just enough oil to spark. With shaking hands, She struck the flint, and a small flame bloomed. The shadows recoiled, hissing silently, but the hooded figure stepped forward, unaffected by the fire. It raised its skeletal hand toward the moon, and Maya felt her chest tighten, her lungs burning as though her breath was being stolen. She screamed, and the sound was ripped away, devoured by the night. In her final moment of strength, she hurled the lantern at the altar. Fire erupted, flames racing across the bones and stone, spreading into the woods. The figures shrieked silently, their bodies twisting in agony as they burned, consumed by the fire. The hooded figure turned its hollow gaze toward her, its form unraveling like smoke. The blood moon above flickered, dimming, its glow fading into pale silver as dawn approached. Maya collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, the fire crackling around her. When she opened her eyes again, the moon was gone, and the forest was alive once more with the sound of birds and wind. The curse had been broken for now, but as she staggered back to her grandmother's house, she couldn't shake the feeling that the blood moon would rise again. And when it did, it would be hungrier than ever. And somewhere in the ashes of the altar, a single whisper lingered, carried on the wind, promising that the blood moon night was far from over